So here we are entering Pittenweem, another quaint, beautiful Scottish seaside town, village.
I presume they were all traditional fishing villages, weren't they?
They really were, yeah.
I just love the shapes of the buildings. They're all different shaped buildings.
Look at that view.
Lovely, the church.
Seems to be a lot of diversions going on in town, so I don't know how close we're going to be able to get to this sort of park by the sea.
Well,
oh no, here we are. Right, just looking for a bit of parking, and I think there's a sort of parking area just past that John Lewis fan.
There's a very good ice cream shop here as well, I seem to recall. There it is. Look at that. Maybe
for
we'll
me.
treat ourselves for an ice cream.
I'm a reformed character.
He's going, but he's going in there. Stop here. Yeah. I think the tide's still coming in, isn't it?
Here's a scene I did last year in oil. It was a wonderful scene. I think it was about 6 months ago I painted this one.
Yeah, I seem to think that actually it was quite cold. We were standing here towards the end having a little bit of a shiver, unlike today.
There he goes.
Just had a lovely chat with those guys. We're going out trail fishing.
Not in Crail though.
No, not in Crail, in Pittenweem.
Here comes the brand new lifeboat in Pittenweem. £2 million it cost.
I think it's only been in service, what, a month or so, did you say?
Brand new, he said.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've arrived at Pittenweem and we found a place to paint, and it's going to be of a building this time, and I've had a few requests about painting buildings, so this is going to be an attempt at that, but painting it with pure watercolour, no ink drawing on it, which is a bit more unusual. Oh, it's bright. A lovely sun trap here, very bright in the eyes. Need my sunglasses. Whew.
Sort of like Greece, this in a way.
Super bright. So this is a lovely spot. You need some sunglasses here. It's so bright. The buildings are painted bright white, but really pretty. So these are the buildings I'm going to have a go at. Bit tricky for watercolour as well, because the white is so white and the paper's white, so not much paint is going to go down on those buildings. So, but it'll be an interesting test, and testing yourself is a good idea, I think. So this is the spot. This place here is beautiful for buildings. It's got some wonderful structures, very much a Dutch influence here, and there's some great buildings. This one over here coming away, is lovely. These sort of buildings, I think they're particularly pretty. And so it's going to be a tutorial. So it's not going to be a painting really. It's just going to be painting parts of the building, just sort of trying to get into the idea of how to paint a building. We're going to try and do it in more pure watercolour. So a little bit more tricky, but I think a little bit more rewarding as well. We finally found a place to paint. It's one of the most difficult things, at least I find it the most difficult thing to commit to. And if you ever do landscape painting, you realise that at some point you've got to commit to a scene. And sometimes it can be a bit of a trial, and it's really been a bit of a trial today. We started off down the coast, and it wasn't right because the light was in the wrong place for the video, so you couldn't see anything, and lots of reflections on the paper. And then we found a beautiful gable end building. But then it turned out to be on a main road. We've got dust carts and it was chaos. So we finally found this place, and it's a bit of relief. So we'll get on with this one. So we're just going to paint bits and bobs of this scene here, starting off with this white building here and this sort of gable end. And that's an interesting scene. We've got some nice chimneys as well, some nice roof lines. And if you look at that, one thing you'll notice is that it's phenomenally complicated. You could be sitting here for months painting a picture. And that's one of the tricks with painting, is that you're trying to hint at things rather than go into great detail. And detail can be a real curse, and it becomes a rod for your back, and you never finish a painting. So I'm trying to do a painting which is simplified, really, where you look at the thing as a whole and try to capture the essence of the painting. So the first thing we've got to do with when you're confronted with a scene like this, it is really overwhelming, this scene. There's so much in it. So we have to get the drawing down, and we have to do the drawing in a simple way, an uncomplicated way. So let's just, I'm going to draw lightly initially, and I'm just going to indicate things very, very quickly. Not worried, I'm not too worried if it's in the right place or the wrong place at the moment. I'm just trying to get something down on the paper. So that I'm making lots of marks, not pressing very hard at the moment, so that's, I don't know whether you can see that. Okay, I'll press a bit harder, but so you see I'm just indicating things everywhere. If you try and put too much detail in initially, you'll get the scale wrong, and scale is an incredibly important part of painting. You want the same scale everywhere. So you can see that. So then you've got the chimney here. What I'm trying to show to you is the speed at which I do things. I don't hang about. Every mark I make helps me later on. See, I'm not too worried about it being perfect. I'm just trying to make sure I get things roughly right. And you've got the ridge. Which is quite high here. Got another chimney at the end. Hopefully you can see that. I'll try and press a bit harder. Got two chimneys here. So see, I'm not focused on one place only. I'm really trying to work out everywhere, really. I find if I focus on one place, I lose judgment, and I can't see the wood for the trees. So if you can get the idea of the general pace of things. I'm not so worried about mistakes, really. It's not something I really focus on too much. There's always going to be mistakes in the drawing. Maybe that's a bit higher. So always just constantly correcting the mistakes I've made, and there are mistakes. See, if you started rubbing out now, every mistake I find helps me to find the next mark. And if you were to rub out your mistakes, it basically takes you back to square one again. And you've got to start all over again trying to work out the scene. But now I've got a sort of general shape of that building. Okay. And then this building here comes out. Over to here. And you have the chimneys coming in. So anyway, that gives you an idea of my painting style without going into too much deliberation. And it's just a question of making marks, really. You've got to make the marks. If you don't make a mark, then you can't correct the mark. So that's a good way of starting. There are lots of errors in that still. But with painting, I really want to start painting the picture now. I don't really want to spend my time doing a drawing. That's not really what I'm about. But the drawing is important, though. I'm not saying it's not important. It is important. Hopefully you can see that there's a real sense of three dimensions now with the drawing. You can see one thing's in front of another. This building's in front of that building, and that's a really good composition element, having things in front of each other and behind things. So now it's a question of having another look at the picture and working out where to start, and that's a really interesting part of it. And I think I'm going to start on this wall. It's a white wall, and one of the things people look at with white walls is that they don't actually notice. They see white, it's a white wall, but they really don't look any further than that. Now this wall is not white, it's an off-white. It's painted white, but because it's in the shade, it drops the tone or the value a couple of stops on it. So we've got to paint that a slightly grey colour, even though it's a white wall. So that's where I'm going to start. So I think it's a little bit of cerulean blue almost. Yeah, cerulean blue and maybe a little bit of burnt umber. Yeah, burnt umber. Ultramarine as well. So just mix these colours up generally, just get some shades in there. But it's a light shade, this. Okay, so we'll start at the top of it with a bit of cerulean blue. Love cerulean blue, it's a great colour. It's an off-white, it's not white. So even that's a little bit too light, I think. So let's change that colour. It's coming down here. It's quite tricky to see the true colour of things when you start to paint. So I've painted the wall a sort of blue, an off-white really. So I'm going to go over the whole thing on that wall. It's very interesting to. White's a fascinating colour. White is so varied. There's so many different shades of white. So that's the first tone in. You see that? And it will dry lighter as well, and that's something you've got to consider too. So that's the first attempt at it. Now we're going to look at the next tone now. So I'm simply thinking in simple planes. I'm not thinking about complexity at the moment, even though this subject is fantastically complex. I don't think of it in that way. So next stage is to the right, this wall here. Now that is a slightly warmer shade, so I'm going to get a little bit of raw sienna and paint that one in. But so it's a little bit warmer. It's quite difficult to tell. It's quite bright bit of papers, and it's in the early stages of painting. It's difficult to tell what is what the values are. Okay, so that's two shades I put on there. Now let's change my brush. That was my biggest brush, my number 14 Raphael, just to get the big areas done. Now I'm going to go to a smaller brush, and we're going to try and capture in the sort of mid-tones really. So it's a brown. So the chimney is what I'm going to try and attempt now, but it's a warmish brown. There, a bit of blue, varied colours. So let's pop that in there like that. Okay, not too much detail, simply pop it on. And then down the side of the building, you have very much a blue toned, I think it's the lead lining to it, the lead waterproofing. So I'm going to put that in, and that's a blue tone. So there we go, from there all the way down to there. And there. Okay, so that gives a sort of shape to the whole thing, sort of running a bit, maybe a bit too much. So looking at the brickwork of this now, and it does vary a lot. There's darker patches, so I'm going to try and put some of that in. And there's a sort of darker roof here. It's very dark on that side. Very interesting structures, chimneys. I do like chimneys. And then we've got a couple of stacks, chimney pots on the top, on there. So we'll pop those in quickly as well. Right, so you see it's sort of looking like it is now. Right, then we'll go on to, I want to simplify these things. I don't want to go into complication. Complication builds up in a picture. You don't have to sort of focus on, right, I'm going to be complicated. This is really complicated, and get out your tiny brush. I like focusing on simple things first. So we're going to have a go at the tiled roof now. So this redness of it. These are pan tiles, an interesting tile, a European tile. It's quite red. So burnt sienna here. Tiny bit of red, and it does change colour quite a lot. So you've got parts of it reflecting, which is interesting, in the sun. I'm looking straight into the sun here, which makes it tricky. And here. And there's the ridge I'm going to put in now as well, the ridge tile. Got tiles coming in here. But you'll notice that the tiles are, some are in shadow and some are in full light. So I want to introduce those. So there is a shadow on the ridge tile, so it's a darkening effect here. Let's get a bit of blue. So it's darker here. The shadow of it going all the way along. Then we come to the chimney at the end. This chimney here. Place that on. So constantly trying to get the right value in. I'm looking very carefully at that dark surface, and it does change a great deal. One thing that I do find with painting is that you can get lost in detail, and it takes a long time to learn not to be, and to look at something. What I do is I look at something and I try and find the essence of it, and if I can find what its core look is, then I can simplify it. So some dark in these areas up here. So I like to paint shadow areas in blue. Even though there might not be much blue, I do like that effect. Gives a sense that it's a colder, shaded area. We've got the ridge of the gutter here. I'll pop in. Far ridge at the other side. So pop that in there as well. So you can see it's a simplified effect. Not interested in complicated effects. Okay. So I'm going to focus on the windows now and get those in. Change the colours, always changing colours. I like changing the tone of things. 1, 2, 3. Now you have the darkness inside, which I'm going to do in a blue tone again. And I add some white at the end of it as well. And the last one. So what you'll notice I'm doing really is I'm looking at values. I'm squinting my eyes and I'm just trying to see the tone or the value, the light and dark of objects. That's all I'm interested in really. So I'm going to go for the dormer windows now and get in the lighter shades, which are the sort of lead work. Let's get some of those in. Quite complicated shapes, dormer windows. And then some of the tiles. You can let that dry for a bit, maybe I can do the bottom of them. So just hinting at things. I never want to go into too much detail with them. And a dark bit of roof. Okay. So let that dry for a bit. So I'm going to head down to the other side of the building. So I'm working on bits and pieces. I'm letting one bit dry and then I'm going to attack another bit. So there is no hanging around in watercolour, especially in this sort of temperature. It's not hot, but it's certainly not cold. So try and get the door in. The window over here. You really have to, there is a sense of urgency with watercolour. You really have to keep moving on. We have the stairs coming in here. The gate at the bottom. So I'm simplifying and picking out darkness, lights and shades. That's all I'm doing. Okay. This is part of the shadow of the paper. The sun's directly coming over, having a raking light coming on. So it's not a dark section there at all. You may as well work around the other buildings whilst things are drying. So let's grab my bigger brush again and have a go at this roof here. Let's pop that in. So burnt sienna and a little bit of ultramarine blue. That's interesting, I like that. So it's a redder tone, and then the buildings behind are less red, so a greenier colour. So burnt umber and ultramarine blue. Not that ultramarine. Let's get another brush. So back to my number 6 brush. It is a complicated thing. They are complicated things, buildings. And you've got to work very deliberately on them. If I were doing a painting like this, I would take quite a lot more time doing it because of the detail, really. There's so much in these scenes. So I'm going to leave a little white line there so that the colours don't bleed into that roof there. It's like a bridge almost. Chimney there. Just to give the hint of it. Maybe this isn't going to be a finished painting. This is going to be more of a sort of have a go at a building. To the windows. There. Darkening down, so always looking at values. Darkening. Just trying to get the most important parts of it, and that's it. There's another sort of window coming this side, or dormer, aerials. Okay, that sort of looks like it. It's had a bit of time for it to dry now, so I'm just trying to get a few steps in. So as the paint becomes darker, it becomes slightly thicker, really. So the paint, it's just slightly thicker. I tend not to worry about how thick a paint is or how thin a paint is, whether it's tea consistent or anything like that. I don't really concentrate on that. I really look at the tone. I'm interested in values only. I'm pretty much disregard how thin or thick the paint is in watercolour. That's really not a concern of mine. So I'm going to put some stairs in here, just a hint of something. And then a gate at the bottom. And that's all it needs, really. Doesn't need any more than that. So again, with the consistency of paint, I'm not worried. I'm worried about how the tone, only the tone and value. It's that door. Now there's a interesting wall this side, which I'll indicate. So that wall goes down here like that. Just carries on down the hill. There's a changing colour of it as well. Another wall comes in here. So these colours, these things are quite important. They give a barrier between that shade and that shade. So they're quite important things. But I'm not going to go too far into that as this is just a demonstration. Okay, leave that simple. So I'll go back into these roofs here now and trying just to simply indicate a few things. Again, not too complicated. So you've got this sort of shadow coming in here. So darker. We're looking straight into the sun, so these chimneys are actually quite dark. A ridge tile. or a blocked off chimney or something. Some little bit of detail there. So I'm getting into more of the detailed approach now, but I'm just hinting still. I'm still trying to keep it simple. So trying to indicate now this building here, which is a yellowy colour. So I'm going to try and use a little bit of yellow ochre. Yellow ochre there. It's maybe a bit too much. A bit of brown maybe, just to darken it off. Okay, so. Okay. Here, that's like darker yellow for the next house along. Again, but I'm just hinting that part of it. So I'll put a few chimney stacks here. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. It's quite random. 1, 2, and some tiny ones over here. So we'll come now to the right-hand side. So what I've tried to do with this is, you can't just paint a building isolated in itself. It needs to be connected to something. For this light area here needed to be connected to these buildings to give it a sense of its coming out. You can't just have a building in space. So this was a way of showing up this value better. So we move over to the right-hand side now. Try and get those values in now. We've got a sort of magnolia building gable end here. So I'm going to try and do that. So burn this cerulean blue and burn umber, I would say. So that's not quite the right colour, but again, it doesn't matter if it's not quite the right colour, as long as it's the right value. I'm much more concerned about having the right value than the right colour. So that's that gable end in there. So whilst we've got one colour, we want to try and get as much done with that colour as we can. So that chimney stack can go in there. Perhaps that connector to there. Trying to get the chimney stack on top. There's another chimney. So many values, so many changes of value, which is so interesting. So I'm dipping my brush in the water all the time to clean it. It's a constant process. Dip, 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 trying to clean the brush for the next pure colour wash. Another gate, what are they called again, Tanya? These little dormer windows. I always forget that. Dormer windows coming in on the other side of there. So they're important to get right. Okay, and now we have the big section coming in of the roof. So I'm going to go burnt umber really. Burnt umber because it's in the shade. Not burnt sienna. Burnt sienna is a much redder medium. So there's that. Let's see whether that's maybe a bit redder. So you can change the colour halfway down if you want. So that's that colour coming in. There we go. One of the phrases I really like, and it's not really a normal phrase for people to say about art, but I say it to myself often, and it's good enough. And I love that phrase. It's good enough. It's good enough for me. And I sort of live by that. Whereas some people might say, oh, it's not quite right, oh, it's not good enough. But it is good enough. Right, I'm going to head back to this section here now. It's a bit drier. And just start putting in some of the details. Oh, there's a nice sort of blue door there, which is interesting. And we have the blueness of the window frames, which is very similar to the main building. So pop some of those in. It's not exactly the same blue, but it's good enough. It's good enough. I do like that phrase. Might infuriate some people, but you know, it's a bit irreverent, but that's the way I like art a bit. A bit of darks in the centre. very dark windows. So just get some darkness going on. Some nice shades. Darkness in here. I wanted that to go a bit bluer. And then these windows at the bottom too. Yeah, that's nice. And a sort of handrail. So it's at this stage really that you start to get into the sort of lines and details, not before. There's a very interesting roof here as well. You're going to enjoy that one, this one here. Sort of, there's a shade.
Porch.
Porch, yeah. Porch, yeah. Porch roof, stop you getting wet. That was interesting. And then a sort of darker line here. And a blue line here. So if we zoom back on the picture now and take it on as a whole, you can see how the picture's coming together now. Each individual part, and that's what's quite interesting with this style. If you were to look at this part in detail, it means nothing. There's nothing there. But it's only when you draw back from the painting where it starts to look like something. And that is so interesting. I find that fascinating. I've often looked at a Monet painting in an art gallery, and I've gone into the picture and tried to look at one particular part, thinking, how did he do that? How did he do that? But there's nothing there. And then I draw back, and suddenly this magical picture arrives. And that's what this is really. It is only when you draw back from a distance that you actually start to see it. Just going to carry on with a few of the details, a few lines really, nothing really complex, just to start adding the little bits of detail which tell you something about the properties. That's quite the fun part of it really. I like these little dips and dabs. So then there's a thick heavy wall coming in here. So right about here there's a big wall, or dark wall anyway. There's a nice dark wall, and the top of the wall there. So you've got some skylights coming in, ridge tiles there. Just to create a few more bits of detail, and that's pretty much done there. Maybe a few things going on. Okay. So we're heading to the other side of the picture now. So we've got these roofs here. And what's going to happen with these roofs is that they're going to be a foil to this lighter area, so that it will bring the house forward. When you put something dark next to it, it just makes it look 100 times better. So we'll start off with the top one. So I always tend to work from high to low. So again, it's a relatively dark roof. So here, and right on the top of it, there's a beam of light. So I'm going to leave a top, see that on the top? On the ridge, right there, there's a bit of light, and that's such an important trick for watercolour, to leave that little bit. Okay. Okay, that's nice. And then we have a little bit of roof at right angles to it, which is a little bit lighter and a little bit redder. So let's give that there. That's it. Or maybe it goes all the way across. I think I will paint it all the way across. There's something funny. There's something black going down it. But and the roofs are so higgledy-piggledy around here. I can't. Sometimes you just lose it. Don't know what's going on. The next roof, that's interesting too, and that is a much redder colour. So burnt sienna. Again, on the ridge, it has a reflection of the light, so it's really light. So I'm going to leave that in there. Change the colour. Goes a little bit bluer as it's in the shadow. Okay, like that. Maybe it goes a little bit longer as well. Okay. And you can see how those have now brought this out. So we've got the next bit of white wall to do now. So again, I'm going to leave a little bit of a barrier. So the white barrier is really to, in this case it was rare because it acts as a reflection, but it stops colours leaching into each other. Sometimes you don't really want that. So this wall here is coming in. And that wall there. That's nice. All sorts of things going on there. And then there's a brick wall, stone wall should I say. Stone wall coming in here. So, like that. But now you can see the three-dimensionality of this scene. It really starts to jump out at you now, even though just simple planes put in, but what an effect they had. So I'm going to let that dry for a bit now, and I'm going to go into the background a bit. So it's going to be like a vignette really, sort of where it sort of disappears towards the edges. But this is just a teaching lesson rather than a finished painting. So back to my big brush, my big number 14 Raphael, and I'm going to head into the sea a bit. And this is where painting with your real eyes on the real subject is so good. A camera you could not do that with a camera, because you're looking into the sun and the value range would be terrible. I don't know how, so a little bit of just looking at the colours, you know, burnt cobalt blue I think in the background. Okay, let's give that a bit. That was too dark really. Let's change the colour, add a bit of burnt ultramarine blue. Okay. There. Really light section there. Very, very light. That's where the sun is, right above there, so very difficult to see. Then on the other side we have the greenery of the hills, and I've just looked at my Veridian and it's in a terrible state. Veridian here, it's a great colour, but it's a really irritating colour. It's the colour I get irritated the most with really, because it dries out so fast. It's terrible for that. So I'm always putting new paint on, but it's quite an expensive colour as well, but I can't really do without it. But we're going to have a go at this side of it, which is the trees. So, but it's looking into the sun. It's got a bluing effect. So I'm going to put a bit of cerulean blue in there as well. It comes up. Interestingly, into here. Hopefully this area here is dry now, and I can start to go into it a bit and bring out some of the details. Again, not too detailed. So that brings out the bottom. More here. So I'm just going around generally picking out things. Roof here. Cerulean blue here again. Remember, if you can hear me, my brush being rinsed out all the time. And a bit trying to get the pan tiles, the under bit of the pan tiles here. There is a lot of detail in the pan tiles. They're very squiggly things, but you notice I've just painted it simply, and that's all I'm going to do to them. A bit of greenery. Hooker's green I'm going to use because my Veridian's in such a bad state. Bit of Hooker's green there. Tighten up this shed. Other shed here. So quite casually placed down. I'm not trying too hard. Something in there. And then there's the turreting, castellation I think it's called. A lot of castellation in buildings around here. which in some countries is illegal now. You're not allowed to do it. Castellation is like a castle when it has these steps or these sort of turrets that you can hide behind. So what I'm going to do now is add the rocks, the sort of fingers of the rocks that go into it. And I've got a really mucky sort of colour here. Do you see that one there? It's a bit of dried this and dried that and blue and brown, and I think it's just right for it. So nothing really. And so you see that it sort of goes out in fingers into the water. Really is part of this because it's quite warm today, so the paint is drying off in weird ways. Quite fun. Real spits of the land. Right, so what I'm going to do now is a little bit of the fine detail. See, I've got my white paint out, my white gouache, and it's got things like the railings to put on. You need railings on a building, so put some of those on, a bit more watery. Done them in blue, why not? Needs the railings, and there's lots of little details really lying around, so just add a few things, adding sort of highlights, just looking for the highlights, the sort of brightness in the edges really. I find this is quite a fun thing. This sun, the sort of skylights I think are quite fun, so a bit of white paint and one there and on there, a bit here. I love the way they reflect the blue sky. That's quite fun. A few bits of detail of the windows.
The dormer windows.
The dormer windows, that's right. And a few lines across here. Amazing how that made a big difference. How about that? Again, hinting. Handrail, need the top of the handrail. That's quite important. You need a thinner brush for that, but I'm not going to bother. So I'm just going around generally looking for examples from my white paint to connect onto. So the last bit in the windows here, just give it a bit of shape. Very light section there, so another bit of layer of white, really reflecting the light. A bit there too. So here's the painting, and I'm going to leave it at that point there. I think it's left at an in-between part, in between too much detail and not enough detail. And I think as an artist, you've got to look at a painting and see, well, is it done? And I think that's done. And for me, it's good enough. The shapes look real. It looks like a solid object, which I particularly like, and nothing's more detailed than anything else. So it has an even amount of detail in there, which is fun. But it looks real to me. I hope you think so too. So as I mentioned earlier, this is a demonstration. It's not a finished painting, and it's a demonstration in pure watercolour. There's no lines in the picture. There's no black outlines anywhere, and that's the most common way of doing watercolour painting or painting of buildings. It's the use of black blinds. But I don't really believe in that too much, really. I like to see the pure watercolour effect and a simple approach. So just one last thing to do, and that's sign it. So James Potter. There we go. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. It was a very different approach. It was very, very difficult lighting conditions today. It's a completely blue sky and we're shooting right into the sun, which does make videography much more difficult, trying to get the right exposure. So I hope that all worked out. And the picture was interesting as well. I do quite enjoy buildings. They're very complicated things, but they're quite rewarding things to paint as well. We're going to be doing, or I'm going to be having an exhibition in Edinburgh in a couple of months, so I've got to do some local scenes, which I'll enjoy doing. A lot of Edinburgh scenes, so a lot more buildings to come in pure watercolour, which I think is the most interesting way of doing them. So I'm hoping to video some of the paintings for that exhibition, so hopefully you can join me for those little demonstrations. We've just watched the last clip and we both realised that I forgot something, and that's to say goodbye. So anyway, goodbye, and I look forward to seeing you next time.